Welcome to the Miller Report. Today's guest is a recognized leader in the New York City construction industry. He serves as co-chairman of Milrose Consultants Board of Directors. Prior to that, he served as the director of construction in the New York City Mayor's office. Well, that's a mouthful right now with what's going on. Let's welcome Lou Milo to the Miller Report. Thank you, Lou. Thank you for coming here. Thank you, Joe Briccato, the chairman of Gensler, for referring you. He said, you got to talk to Lou. If you're going to build any building in New York, get Lou on the show. And here you are.
Very kind, Susan. Thank you for having me today.
So, Lou, the Miller Report mostly focuses on politics and real estate. You've been involved in New York City construction for your entire career.
That's correct.
So share with us, first of all, how'd you get started and what does Milrose do?
Very interesting. I had absolutely no intention of becoming a municipal consultant. When I was at St. John's University, I went undergrad and graduate in public administration, and I was very deep into democratic politics. So my first few jobs were with Ed Koch for 5 years, but I also read Italian newspapers for Mario Cuomo when he wanted to be running for president. I worked for Harrison Golden during the baseball strike, and we were very involved with New York City at that time.
What do you do? Tell the audience.
So we're municipal consultants. We deal with building codes, zoning. We help model buildings, and we do all of the regulatory work in order for you to occupy. So we're first in, last out, and we get certificates of occupancy. Milrose does all of this work nationally now. We're now for the last 4 years, we've expanded, but our core and our roots are in New York City and the tri-state.
So when you work for the mayor's office, first of all, which mayor?
Ed Koch.
Ah.
Loved him to death.
Oh, yeah, he was a good mayor.
Fabulous in New York.
What was that like? You want to tell us any story?
It was spectacular. We had no money. We had no resources. The Bronx was on fire. Brooklyn was a disaster. And we slowly rebuilt it piece by piece. Stories. The New York City Marathon at that time maybe had 600 people running. One time I rode the paint machine at night to put the blue line down. We had changed the signs in Central Park. I remember the font was called Bimbo.
Bimbo?
Bimbo, exactly. We had a wonderful time. We had, like I said, no resources, but it was all about New York.
What was the first project you worked on at the mayor's office?
Oh, gosh, first project that I worked on in New York. Well, it's a tough one. It's 50
Well, how about the
ago.
most memorable?
Most memorable was, sadly, when the crane fell on Bridget Gurney on 3rd Avenue, and we spent 72 hours saving her life.
Wow.
Having her, the crane removed without amputating her legs, and then we had an event at Gracie Mansion for all of the people that were involved. That was probably one of the most memorable. So
I know this is a political and real estate show. This is different times in New York right now with what's going on at the mayor. Before we got onto what you do you want to add anything about what you see with all these investigations? Because you work closely working with the mayor. Tell us what you think.
Well, it's like biting a hand grenade.
I know, but you know what? I'm just going ad-libbing here, so people want to hear.
For the interest of New York City, we hope that the mayor and his administration can bring closure to the investigations that are happening right now. It's a sad time with all of the commissioners, and most recently the Board of Education Commissioner.
Yeah, he was on the show 2 weeks ago, David Banks.
2 weeks ago. New York needs strong leadership, and whether it's going to be this current mayor in the next administration or a new mayor, they have to recognize that this is a $1 trillion economic city that was rebuilt by Mike Bloomberg. It's an international city, and it takes strong leadership and honesty. So let's hope for the best for New York.
Good political answer.
Calm.
And I understand that you have a lot of clients here. You were rolling off some clients before we started.
Yes.
You said things like, Goldman and
Yes.
and all these major companies that you're representing, law firms, accounting firms, and I know you have to be careful, but we all have the same interest, and we are really trying to keep the city together and strong. Do you think that there's any smoke? You think there's just smoke, or you think there's something real behind all these investigations?
The federal government has unlimited time, resources. They have no profit incentive. There must be something. We may never know what it is. Like I said, I just hope for the best for New York and for Mayor Adams.
Okay, so back to what you do. Thank you for that, because we have people want to hear what's happening from somebody who's worked with the mayor's office. I think this is going to ring true to a lot of people. When you do a project, when somebody wants to hire your company, you said you do permits, you do labor relations, neighborhood objections. Is there any specific thing that somebody would want to look for, or is it just all of the above?
All of the above. So we are involved early on in the process. We may be brought in by a Fried Frank or a Kramer Levin law firm. We may be brought in by a broker. We work with the top brokers in New York City.
Well, Empire State Properties is the top broker in New York City.
Empire State Realty Trust, Empire State Brokerage. We work with the CBREs and the Cushmans and the Newmarks. We have the privilege of working with, I would say, the best professionals in the industry. And they're involved with the best projects.
So can you tell us some of the projects you're working on right now in New York? People would love to hear that.
Sure. We recently finished One Vanderbilt for SL Green at 42nd Street.
Beautiful.
We are working on JP Morgan's headquarters at 270 Park Avenue, which is just a magnificent project. Wow. We are working on Wells Fargo. You had John Sacrakides in here. His friends call him Sac. So we're over in Hudson Yards. We're involved with BlackRock and Blackstone. We have quite a few projects countrywide.
And
IBM.
Say that again?
IBM, MetLife.
IBM's coming to New York?
IBM is going to be at 1 Madison, another SL Green building. So they took about 250,000 feet, and I think they're just about ready to move in.
I have to thank Dale Schlater. I hope he's listening.
Yes.
Because he came on the Mueller Report a year ago, and he said, New York's not going anywhere. There's so many great projects going on. You'll see. And look, it's a year later. And so you see New York is kind of upbeat and new companies coming.
New York is strong. It has depth. It has density. If you remember when Gerald Ford and they told, New York City dropped dead years ago in the Daily News, that was, I think, the headline. It may have been the Post, but I thought it was the Daily News. We have a resiliency here. People are here. There is not only residential, there's entertainment, there's industry, there is commercial. You don't get this anywhere in the world. Our central business district is stronger than anything. We have Goldman Sachs downtown. We have Citadel expanding here in New York City after building the headquarters. It's not by accident. So these type of projects are 10 years in the making. Mm-hmm. They don't just happen overnight. So by the time we start construction and permitting, it's probably 8 years already by the time the assemblage has been put together, the design teams have been hired, the legal, air rights have been bought. There's a significant amount of work before construction starts.
So all the noise of 500,000 people leaving, and New York is tanking, and New York is just dirty, and the migrants. Do you think that's just noise?
Anytime there's change, we are not in my backyard. So yeah, sometimes the city's a little dirtier than normal.
Some of the streets, like I have to walk down different streets to get to this radio station. Like sometimes you have to be careful. It's not like it was.
There are pockets. Mm-hmm. So if I was to compare, and I said, okay, you went to Italy, which I love the country, being of Italian heritage. There are parts of Rome that I would not walk down certain streets. So you have to be aware. And awareness protects you no matter where you live. I have friends in suburbs who are, paranoid about crime, and they live in magnificent neighborhoods. So
well, yes, it's just relative. I think we're coming off the pandemic, and a lot of people have left, and stores are now reopening, and this is a very positive moment. Thank you so much, Lou, for sharing this. I got to tell Sid Rosenberg. Sid is like, I'm done with New York. It's horrible. So.
I just saw Sid before. He has a magnificent tan.
Did you tell him you were coming here?
I met him in your lobby over here, so he looked great.
That's great.
He was
Well,
heading
we
home to go
argue
to
all the
sleep.
time about this. He's like, Suzanne, you got to be crazy. I'm like, well, it's still the best city in the world.
Best city in the world.
So what are some of the misconceptions that an average person has when you're building a building for the regulations?
Misconceptions. Everyone assumes that that a building is going to negatively impact their lives. When a building's completed, it uplifts an entire community. So if you look historically at what has happened here, and I'm going to go back to the Bloomberg administration, Mike Bloomberg told companies, if you want to come to New York, we're not giving you a tax break. This is New York City. He turned it into a global city.
Yep.
So much development that it pushed into Brooklyn, Queens, Long Island
Can you get him
City,
back, Lou?
Jersey City. I think he's happy where he is right now. And he made money for so many different people, and he improves the lives of so many different people. When a school opens and a hospital opens, that community benefits from it. Nobody likes change. Everyone likes, I want my one-story building. I like to go to my department store. I got that. Everybody does. Yet at the same time, if your lives improve and New York City can bring people from across the country here, they come to NYU. They don't leave. They fly in from Kansas to come to work for Goldman Sachs and Wells Fargo and Citadel. They come from Chicago. And there's a reason they stay here in New York, because it's an incredible city with a pulse.
Do you work for the tourist board?
No, I've traveled a lot. You can go to Washington, D.C., great city. At 9 o'clock at night, you're the only person on the sidewalk. That's not a city.
Again, this is great news, and you're speaking my language. I'm a native New Yorker. I'm in every taxi talking about how great New York is, just so you'll see me. And you're probably on the taxis with me.
And I live in New York City
Yes.
also. I moved from Long Island to New York City to be with my children. So my family are all in the city also.
And you're paying city taxes, I guess.
It is what it is.
Here we are. We're still standing.
That's correct.
Let's talk about rent-stabilized apartments. Have they impacted construction in New York?
So Governor Hochul, when they pulled the 421A, they put a stop to real estate development. Everybody assumes that residential development, and we have to remove the word affordable housing. It's an oxymoron. Housing. Everybody needs housing. What's affordable to you may not be affordable to someone else. The state and the federal government have a responsibility to provide incentives to the real estate community so they can build. If it's too expensive to build, if the land cost, the construction cost, the carry cost, the financing cost, your apartment's going to be $8,000 a month. So how many people can really afford that? The answer is almost none. So what happened was the younger people who come to New York City, they put 2, 3, 4 people in an apartment. I don't agree with the mayor with we're going to put people in basements and cellars and micro apartments. We spent years getting rid of single room occupancies, the SROs. We had laws that were put in place. And this is all driven by the state because it's part of the multiple dwelling law. The minute they took the incentive out because developers were considered bad, evil people.
Capitalism.
If you go to the 70s and you look at what happened in the Bronx, when I worked in Koch in the 80s, you could stand in the South Bronx and look 10 blocks in every direction and not see a light on or a building. He rebuilt the city, and he used local-based enterprises. And there were community groups that were set. They gave the land to the developer for $1. Mm-hmm. They gave him the financing that came through. I think at that time it was Chemical Bank.
Business brings business.
And they built the community. First they did the housing. Then the bodegas came. Then the stores came. Mm-hmm. The schools came. The police and fire departments were there. And all of a sudden the Bronx is a thriving community. That's a 40-year investment. So we can't think short-sighted. So everyone believes, we're going to convert these commercial buildings to residential. It's extremely difficult, extremely costly. And when it's completed, it's not affordable.
The
It's
funny
housing.
part is it, Lou, that they want to convert it, but you'll have more commercial tenants if you have more people living here, if you have more residential apartments on the market. Statistics say that there's 500,000 apartments that are rent stabilized that are not on the market, because if I'm a landlord, why do I want to put an apartment on the market if I'm told how much I could charge? I have to still pay for the electricity. I have to pay the common charges. I have to pay the expenses. But I'm capped on my rent. I'll just take it off the market.
I have spoken to many landlords who come back and say that with all of the additional regulations that have been put on to residential buildings, it's near impossible for them to maintain them in a safe manner.
By the way, you can't evict somebody for not paying rent.
No, you cannot. You cannot. You cannot. Now, again, there are New Yorkers. You know, I like to call myself a compassionate libertarian. I believe in actually less government, but I'm also compassionate for those in need. There are people here who can only afford $200 a month. Okay, they may be very old. They may have a disability, and they do need help, and they do need. That's the compassionate side.
A lot of them are just working the system.
Yes. Then we have the other side, which we're all aware of. I don't believe that's 90% of the people, but I do have clients and friends who have had horror stories of people not paying rent. The minute COVID came in, someone said you don't have to pay your rent anymore. People just stopped.
Housing court is 2 years, 3 years.
It's ridiculous. It truly is a tragedy what they created. And when you go there, the judge says, well, what's my choice? I could either evict you or homeless, or I will just rely on the landlord to continue with this because
and
he
pay
has money.
taxes. The
And
city
pay
is
taxes.
paying the real estate taxes.
Right.
So I guess this has affected your business. You're not really building or doing permitting for rent stabilized apartments.
No, absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
That market's completely dried up.
Wow.
Yeah.
I heard, I hope I'm wrong, that they're going to now charge the landlords rent on vacant apartments, or what the rent should be. Have you heard that?
There are so many city council proposals that we literally receive a new regulation every month, whether it has to do with gas piping, energy, parapet inspections, temperature for the buildings. There are so many things that, see, New York City compared to let's call it a new constructed city. We have housing stock that's 200 years old. We have housing stock that's a year old. The older housing stock, whether it is a brownstone or an Upper East Side, building with the white glazed bricks on them, those buildings require and need maintenance to be upgraded. You cannot have more rent control. If a developer can't have a return on investment, they're just not going to build. There's no incentive.
So
and the city can't do it.
Changing commercial space isn't fixing the problem. It's moving it forward.
It's eroding the tax base.
Yes.
It erodes the tax base because one building, the average person, I think I had read, spends $3,000 a year, every employee in that building, on average. Food, taxi, transportation, whatever it may be. They pay a higher rent tax to New York City. Once you go residential, your tax base erodes. It's not in our interest to do all these conversions. Some buildings should be knocked down, the older stock there just don't meet the needs of today's financial client. They need higher ceilings, new systems, modernized elevators. The cost is too much. And it's one of the reasons why buildings are knocked down and the new ones are put up. Citadel built 425 Park Avenue. Magnificent building. Tore the building down. J.P. Morgan took down 270 Park Avenue. I think it was a 53
What are they
stories.
getting a foot for these buildings now?
In terms of rent?
Yeah.
It's the higher portion of the building could be $200 a foot for commercial rent. The low side, I would say, is probably about $80. That's the low. But, there's a blending average. Mm-hmm. So there'll be a little more incentive for the client to move
still
in.
flights of quality.
No doubt about it. Yeah, what's suffering now is the B and C market. The A market, if you're Goldman Sachs, you're going to go best in class. Your Citadel, best. J.P. Morgan, best in class.
What's going to happen to the B buildings?
They'll be knocked down. There'll be changes.
And the banks are going to take them back, and us taxpayers are going to pay the tax on the deficit.
There is a tremendous amount of default happening right now in the commercial marketplace. You will see more this year. And part of the reason is real simple. You borrowed at one rate, mortgages are coming due. You can't make the debt service. But whoever does buy it has the incentive now to renovate it.
Because they're buying it for so much less.
So much less, yeah.
So it's starting again, it's restarting.
That's right.
And the bank's taking the write-off on these?
They have no choice.
Well, they could make a deal.
Well, it's always a good deal when you come back in and say we bought the building for $800 million, we sold it for $400 million. Well, the bank took a haircut. Your equity just bled out completely. So I don't see how anybody wins in that except for the new buyer. But if you take that, there have been new funds set up by all the big hedge funds, the BlackRocks, the Blackstones, the Carlyle Group.
Distress funds.
Distressed property funds.
When a building is being built, are developers going on the street to get money, or are they going to the bank? What do you see?
I think they go more to pension funds, foreign capital.
Foreign? What countries?
Believe it or not, the biggest investor in the country is Canada.
Oh, wow.
Mexico's right up there.
Thought you were going to say Iran.
Yeah, no. I don't think they're investing here, even though I'm not allowed to talk politics. So, yes. But the amount of money that flows in is all based on currency rates.
Well, I'm not going to let that slide. Where are they investing?
Where are they investing today?
You said Iran. You said you're not allowed to talk politics. Where are they investing?
There are properties that you'll see in New York City. You'll be surprised who owns them. Let's leave it at that.
Well, I'm going to be investigating this.
You do that. You get them.
Wow. Coming soon on the Miller Report.
Ownership is not what you
I guess that's
believe.
good news, because then they will be careful before they try and, eradicate us, because they have property here.
I think that the Persians in Iran are not a warring people. I'm hoping for peace in the globe. I think we have to ratchet down the rhetoric in the world, and hopefully we become a little more peaceful.
I really like your style. You're so optimistic. World peace. New York is fine.
I have grandchildren.
Everybody's building here. You moved to New York. You're here.
Yes.
We got to love this guy. You want to be mayor?
I've been called the mayor of New York many, many times, and I would rather bite my fingers off before I became mayor, having seen what the last 12 years looks like. No, not even an interest in it. Thank you.
Last question. Well, first of all, I want to mimic what you said earlier. I do want, when you walked in, you said if you were mayor, you would move the UN, because today's the day of the UN, and took us so long to get here. Repeat what you told me when we came here.
Sadly, after 9/11, from the terrorist attacks, as a message to the world, I would have taken the United Nations and moved them downtown. And I would have put them on one of the sites that were destroyed, one of the trade centers.
How great would that be?
For symbolism, for global unity, and I would have freed up the traffic up here trying to get to your office this morning. And the east side could have been a massive park and enjoy the waterfront. I would have, if I was the mayor at that time.
Well, maybe you will be. So I have one last question.
Sure.
If you were the mayor.
Yes.
And I say people call you mayor, what initiatives would you start to keep the construction going and to really restart the city?
Oh boy. So I would bring together the best and brightest residential developers, commercial developers, design community, and contractors. And I would build a coalition of what should we do and how can we do it. And I would listen to them. And I would not worry about re-election, because I think too many people concentrate on, I need to get reelected, including our federal legislators.
So they're worried about politics rather than running the business.
The minute an elected official is elected, they're already running for re-election, and that's where the influence.
Except for Biden.
Yes, but he's good at church. My daughter Victoria said, "Don't get dragged into politics today." So.
No, but in a way, you have to listen to what he says now, because now he's going out and he actually doesn't care about being reelected.
He doesn't care, right?
Maybe he's
and he's aged out, and we'll see what happens come November. I would once again look at New York City, but I'll leave you with a concept that I had 2 years ago. New York City needs a sixth borough. How crazy does that sound? In 20 years, New York City's population will swell so much just through immigration, growth, business. It's unsustainable. Every city, we have an aged infrastructure, whether it is water, sewer, trains, no matter where we are. We need to build a sixth borough upstate New York. Make it part of New York City.
Put the railroad there and
put a high-speed train right down here to New York City and build the best of what we have here there. I don't care if it's in Albany. I don't care if it's in Buffalo.
How about Coney Island?
For you, Coney Island, yes.
We're going to put the sixth borough in Coney Island.
And the reason I say this is that if the land cost is zero, and you make it a union, non-union, we can have a green city, carbon-free. We can have electric vehicles if that's what they prefer. Jury's out on those. I don't own one. But we'll be able to provide housing for people that is like New York City, if that's what you prefer. We could build brownstones for pennies. Land cost here is prohibitive.
All the rooms are being taken by migrants.
There is a crowd. There's a crowd.
It was not
there is a crowd. Yes, there is. And some of those hotels, when they are vacated, will be totally gut renovated, and Milrose Consultants will be there to assist them as far as things go. But I would hope that our visionaries are looking forward and not looking backwards.
Sixth borough, okay.
Sixth borough, you heard it here first. We've done it artificially by default, and that's Jersey City, Journal Square, Hoboken. If you look at the development that's out there, Goldman Sachs has their headquarters, Citibank's out there, Morgan Stanley's out there, Deutsche Bank's out there.
I was there with the dirt with Sam Lefrak when he was first building it. So where would you build it? What would be your first choice?
I would say you're going to look at infrastructure. Certainly you'd put another airport. You would have high-speed train. Yeah, do it right. Do it right. And if you move, not forcefully move, I think people will say, it's not too bad. If you remember when we were much younger, there were no area codes. Then all of a sudden it was 718. Then if you didn't have a 212 area code, you were like in the outer boroughs, which was like, oh my God, you're not a New Yorker, right? Now today we have cell phones, 917, 646. No one cares what your zip code is. Excuse me, your area code. Back then it was so important, right? All people, all New Yorkers want the same thing. Okay, if you said to me, no matter who you are, color, race, gender, sexuality, it's irrelevant. What do you want? You want a safe community? You want a good job? You want to raise your family and children? You want housing? Okay, we want to be able to practice our religion in peace, whatever that might be. We want to make sure that we have a future for the children, for the next generation. Doesn't make a difference who you are. That's what we need to focus on, and that's what real estate does for people. It's the greatest business in this country. It truly is. And again, we work for Google and Amazon, and we work for Target. We even do gas stations, across the country. When something comes into a community and you can create jobs for people that they can go home and take care of their family, what greater feeling can that New Yorker have?
If you build it, they will come.
Absolutely they will. Absolutely, they will. And for those who went to Florida, congratulations. Don't worry about it. If you remember in the 70s, we had a flight from 6th Avenue to go to the Sun Belt. JCPenney, Exxon, United Airlines. 6th Avenue was an empty canyon. 1177 Avenue of the Americas sat just steel for almost 8 years. Look at it today.
We're resilient. We're coming back. We're here.
We are a strong city, and our leadership has to say that. Believe it and deliver.
Who's going to be the mayor? Last question. If Adams doesn't rerun.
Well, since it's WABC, I'll say John Katzimatidis.
Well, he's not running, so next.
I don't know. You know,
Stringer, Cuomo.
I always
Curtis Lewa. Who are you thinking?
I always like to say that it's the unknown candidate that has not come forward yet that will be. Okay, and if you look at most elections, those who were early on, like DeSantis in Florida, gone. Eric Adams, they didn't even recognize him at the Democratic convention to make a speech.
It's the last horse. Comes ahead.
They learned from the other ones.
Okay,
so
well.
Keep your powder dry and let's see where we go.
I have some ideas. Let's see.
Let's see what happens.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on the Miller
Suzanne,
Report. This is wonderful, though. I really enjoyed this, and I hope my audience did, too. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
This is great. We learned so much. You were great.